Today, joining us now in the Element Wealth Studios, our good friend Major Johnny Poulos with the Mississippi Highway Patrol, and on to talk about his new role. You've been there a while now, about a year, is that right?
It started in October of last year, but Gerard, time flies.
I know. Director of the 1034 Project Wellness and Resiliency Program, and what I always recall about this, Major, is I recall having you on the program in your prior role, and I asked you about this subject specifically. And a few weeks later, you're over there. You got appointed by the commissioner to head this thing up and to represent Mississippi in this, because it's a nationwide effort, right?
That's correct. And I'm a firm believer in fate, Gerard, and I definitely remember that conversation. Yeah. And I can tell you in this new role, I've drilled down into a lot of things in what we have not looked at in law enforcement in the past. And Commissioner Tindall, Colonel Ginn, and Lieutenant Colonel Sanders are in full support of the 1034 project. It's moving forward, and we're looking forward to full implementation of the program. This is needed not just in our agency, but in every 8 law enforcement agency across this country.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what your occupation is. If you're stressed, if you're not sleeping, if you've got outside issues, distractions, any sort of depression, these are factors that affect your ability to perform. And in the case of a law enforcement officer, where you're subject to being in harm's way at the drop of a hat any minute during your shift, that's the difference between life and death if you can't perform to your absolute optimum ability. And all these other outside factors could play a part in your ability to perform. And the other thing is, of course, we got to retain these folks. We don't have enough as it is. And we've got to make sure that they've got healthy minds and healthy bodies so that they can stick around, do this important work. And when they choose, Majors, because you did, when you choose to go into that work, you don't do it for the money. You do it because you have this passion to serve and to protect. We're not producing enough people, frankly, that want to do this kind of work. And This makes it even harder if they get in and they have to deal with all these issues.
You're absolutely correct. And we have to take a holistic approach to these type of wellness programs regarding diet, physical health, and the big elephant in the room for law enforcement, brain health.
Sure.
A lot of people don't realize repeated exposure to traumatic events for law enforcement officers can have long-lasting effects. We're taught to compartmentalize things. We're taught, I didn't see what I saw. I didn't hear what I heard. And we put all of this stuff in mental boxes, and we try to store them away. But what eventually happens to boxes that you keep putting things in? They fill up, right? And eventually you're going to have an overflow. Our issues are the overflow. How are we helping officers when it comes to a point of you've just dealt with so many things out there doing this job, and we do it day after day after day. So this is one of the big pieces of the puzzle for wellness programs, is to provide that support for these officers, but not only the officers, for their families as well. Because Gerard, a law enforcement officer's support system normally starts with their families.
Sure.
And we have to help them deal with the climate in law enforcement in today's society. Retention, recruiting, as you just brought up, it is huge. We have to let people know, since law enforcement is evolving, and by the way, since law enforcement is evolving, law enforcement agencies have to evolve as well.
Sure.
If you don't, you're going to be left behind. And you're doing a disservice not only to the public, but to the officers they're serving as well.
And their families.
Absolutely. And so that is why the 1034 project for the Mississippi Highway Patrol is so important. But we're also touching base with with law enforcement officials across the state. I'm talking to sheriffs. I was on the phone with Chief John Miller, the chief of Biloxi Police Department, discussing the importance of these type of programs. So we're getting it up off the ground. We're getting a lot of support, and this is going to benefit not only officers, but it's going to benefit our communities as well.
Wow. So, and I think the commissioner did good by selecting you for this role, Major. It feels like it's just perfectly suited for you. Your passion for the work, for the department, for the agency, and law enforcement in general, and your experience as a law enforcement officer is critical as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and I appreciate that. And, I had a meeting with Commissioner Tennell and Colonel Rain again, and I think they realize, again, the change that has to be made. Look, I'll say it, I'm old school. I came out a long time ago. I'll start my 24th year in law enforcement this year. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I've got a son that's a trooper. Yeah. But I've had to change some things myself. Okay. I've had to change. If I'm going to stay in this profession, I have to evolve as well. Sure. So, and that's the positive side of what we're going to do. We're going to start changing the culture. Yeah. We have to do that in the recruiting process, in the Trooper Academy. And then after they graduate, we want these officers to know that support is going to stay in place throughout your entire career. We have to get officers prepared for retirement. Yeah. We want them to be successful in retirement. Absolutely. We don't want them to be all stressed out when they reach that point. Sure.
And as much as we don't like to even go there, we have to talk about suicide prevention.
Absolutely.
Is an important situation we have to deal with in law enforcement as well. I mean, we have to deal with it across a variety of occupations, but in particular, the sort of stuff that law enforcement officers are exposed to.
That's right.
Is more likely to trigger those inclinations.
And, luckily, we don't experience the number of suicides in the southeast region for law enforcement versus the rest of the nation. But here's the thing. We don't know how many are contemplating it. That's the approach we have to look at as well, and that's the approach we have to take going forward to prevent that, to let these officers know, hey, we get it. We know what you're subjected to, but now we've got peer support in place. And Gerard, our peer support team was implemented in January of this year. We certified 35 state troopers and MBI agents. And the reason we did that, of course, we have counseling available if an officer needs, if they're involved in an officer-involved shooting or anything outside of law enforcement. We have that resource. But peer support is huge because it's another officer that you can go to, or they can approach you and talk about some things that you're going through that they probably experienced themselves in the past, and they can help guide you. It's training. They're trained on how to do that, to help guide you to where you take the right direction, not the wrong direction, and how you go forward and how you're going to process this.
So the empathy is just so effective as a way to deal with this and to counsel and to just work with folks to keep them stable in mind and stable in body. I got to also believe, Major, that we get better performing law enforcement officers when we create these kind of environments.
Well, you're dead on the money. And again, I think that when the communities know that we're now at a point to where we want healthy officers out there. And when I say healthy, I mean overall. Sure. I'll bring up again, brain health. We train. You know the type of training that law enforcement officers go through. You can have the best equipment, the best physical training that's out there, but at the end of the day, you have to know how to implement that. You have to have the right mindset to be successful in doing that, not only on the job, Gerard, but off the job as well. That is huge when it comes to your family relationship.
Yeah. Well, and it's another good point there, because if you can achieve that stability of mind and body, then your life outside of being a law enforcement officer tends to improve, or it's more stable as well. And see stable families. Well, I think that this is something that's been so desperately needed, and I'm so pleased to see, Major, that there's a focus on this and that there's an institution, if you will. We've institutionalized this effort, and we've recognized it, and we don't dismiss it, I think, like we used to do or have a tendency to do in the older days. But now it's become front and center, and you guys are all over it. Yeah. Always a pleasure seeing you, my friend, and appreciate your service. And as always, please pass on my gratitude to the men and women of the Mississippi Highway Patrol and all the great work they do.
Will do. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you, Major Poulos. We'll take a break right here on Middays. We'll come right back. Stay with us.